Thank you.
All right. And here is the reason we are here. Reverend Joanne.
Thank you, David, for that lovely song, and Dee Dee for that reading, and thank you, Debbie, for everything you do. And thank you all for being here. Yeah, it fills up a little after the bell rings, doesn't it? I want to say a couple more words about Mother's Day. I read on the internet a while ago that when a mother says she doesn't want anything for Mother's Day, what she means is she wants a hug. She means she wants to see you. She wants to hear from you. She wants to get a text. Or she wants to have a conversation with you. She wants to get an update from you without asking. She wants to look at your face. She wants to hear you say, "Mom, how are you doing?" That's what she wants. Even if she says, "Don't get me anything for Mother's Day," certain things are there to make our mothers happy, I think. And I think the other thing is our mothers always want us to be happy and healthy. I know for me, when I think of my kids, that's what I want for them. Although my sister, she used to pray for her kids to be happy and content. And then about 15 years later, they were happy and content. Not doing much, but they were happy and content. She said, "I think, God, I better reword that." Her prayer had been answered. So I think it's always important on Mother's Day to acknowledge that not everybody has warm and fuzzy feelings about their mother. And I didn't realize that for a long time, because pretty much when I grew up, if people didn't like their mothers, they wouldn't say that. And I think everybody respected their parents. But when I was in probably my early 20s, I had a friend, and she said to me, we were talking about goals and stuff like that, and she said, "My goal in life is to be as little like my mother as possible." It blew me away. I just thought, I mean, it was so far. I mean, I want to be as much like my mother as possible. A little. And she was the kind of person, and I always respected her for wanting to always improve herself. And she thought it would improve herself to be as little like her mother as possible. So I think we should remember that not everybody had a good upbringing and a supportive and loving mother. But as Dee Dee said, there are people in our lives who played that role, who are nurturing to us and loving to us, even if it's not our mother. And maybe it's not a woman, maybe it's a man in our lives who provided that. But for whatever it is, let's just take some time today and acknowledge that loving part of our life. My daughter, a couple years ago, she called me a week before Mother's Day, and she said, "Hi, Mom, what you doing for Mother's Day?" And I'm like, "I think you're supposed to be doing something for me." So it just kind of hit me funny, like, how are you going to entertain us on Mother's Day or something like that? But today they're coming over, so we're going to have a good time just being together. So we're going to do a little shifting gears here. We're going to talk a little bit about what our theme for May is, and that is Pathway to Transcendence. And I want to talk a little bit about that word transcendence, because it's a little up there. And to me, transcendence means that we're getting more in touch with the power that created us, our higher power, whatever that looks like to you, God, however you understand it. Getting closer to that and a little away from our humanness. And one of the ways we do that, of course, is through prayer and meditation. When we do that, we kind of solidify that bond between us and our higher power. Transcendence is a state of being that has overcome the limitation of physical existence. So just kind of moving out of this humanness into our spiritual life. And when we do that, I think what our tendency is and our goal is to emulate some of those God qualities and be more God-like in our humanness, and that is be more loving, feel more peace, have more harmony in our life, beauty, joy, order, all that kind of stuff. So the title of today's message is Pathway to Clarity. Now, clarity, remember at the first of the year we write a word on a white stone. We have a little ceremony. And my word that I wrote on the white stone this year was clarity. Because what that means to me is I want to be able to clearly hear that inner voice within me. That's what I want to be clear about. You know, what is my purpose here? What is my mission? What's my next step? I want to be clear about that. I want clarity. And here's what Ernest Holmes says about that. He says, "It is from the mountaintop of spiritual communion that we receive the inspiration. We must keep the channel free and clear. We must provide a way for the ideas of spirit to flow into our minds and out into what we are doing. From the mountains top of spiritual communion." So, to me that means in our prayer life. That's what brings us to that connection with our higher power. So are you familiar with Ganesh? Ganesh is one of the aspects of the Indian God. And there it is, Ganesh. And some people think about Ganesh as being the god of abundance and the god of sweeping the way, keeping clear our way, removing the obstacles. And you can just kind of think about that trunk of Ganesh sweeping the way, clearing the way, and opening up so we can hear that clear voice within us, that inner voice. Ernest Holmes says, "No one need go unguided through life, for all are divine at the center, and all are images of the Most High. No one needs go unguided." That's comforting, because we have the guidance within. So we're going to talk about 3 different sweepings today, so that trunk sweeping. And the first sweeping is what we call the sweep of shifting. And what we're shifting is our perspective. And then we're going to be talking about forgiving, and we're going to be talking about opening. But we're going to start out with shifting, to shift our perspective. There was a minister and he was giving a sermon on temperance, and he was explaining. And he was a kind of a hellfire and brimstone kind of a preacher, and he wanted to really emphasize to his congregation the evils of things like liquor and tobacco, and he also thought chocolate was one of those things we had to be temperate about. So what he did, he took some jars, and he took one jar, and in it was liquor, alcohol. And in that jar, he put a live worm, okay? The next jar was filled with cigarette smoke. Again, put a live worm in that jar. The third jar was the dreaded chocolate, and he put the worm into that jar of chocolate. And the fourth jar was a jar of good, clean soil. Put the live worm into that good, clean soil. And so he gave his sermon about how terrible the drinking and smoking and chocolate is, and advocated this life of good, clean living. So then the finale was he takes these jars and he lifts the jar with the alcohol in it, and guess what? The worm was dead. Of course, he lifts the next jar, the jar with the cigarette smoke in, worm is dead. Jar with the chocolate, the worm is dead. And of course, with the good, clean soil, the worm is flourishing. And so he said, what can you learn from this demonstration? So this old lady in the back room of the room raises her hand and she says, as long as you drink, smoke, and eat chocolate, you won't have worms. Now you see, that was her perception of this demonstration. Not exactly what he had in mind, but we each have our own perception. And so we all have perceptions, and what we're talking about this morning is shifting some of our perceptions from one thing to another. Like the perception that I just don't know what to do. I don't know what God wants of me. I don't know what my purpose is. I don't know what my next step is. I just don't know. We can shift that perspective to there is a power within me that does know that. And I simply have to be quiet and call on that power. How about changing a perspective of, oh, life is so hard, to, well, it's like my friend Diana. Some of you knew her. She was a practitioner that moved to Arizona. And she was telling us one time about this guy she worked with. And he would say to her, Diana, life is so easy for me. And she just thought that was an incredible affirmation, and it is. And sometimes when I'm not exactly feeling life is so easy for me, I remember that, and I state that life is so easy for me. Why shouldn't it be easy for me? I've got a power within me, a power that created everything in the world. That power is within me. So why shouldn't life be easy for me? Instead of thinking people are out to get you, maybe think about how people have helped you recently. Dee Dee was telling me she's been working on yard and car and house and this and that, and we need people. We need guys. We need a guy, right? And the people that she has run into in these various areas, she'll say to me, and they were so nice. They were so nice. And I have found the same thing. I had a guy come over and fix my washer. And he was a Muslim. But we got to talking. We just had the greatest spiritual connection and conversation. People are willing. They want connection, and they want to be helpful. So why not change that perspective of, oh, everybody's out to get me? Instead of girding up for the negative, make plans for the positive. Instead of, worrying about this or that, get that picture of what you want, what you desire, and think about that. Visualize that. Instead of looking for the worst case scenario, think about what your next great opportunity is. Now, I frankly don't think it's a bad idea to think about what's the worst thing that could happen. Because I think when we face that, then we can say, I can do that. Even if it's like, well, what's the worst thing? I'm sick, I'm in the hospital, I could die. Well, that's part of life too. We can accept that. The same friend of mine who didn't like her mother so much, she and her husband had a business, and they were this close to bankruptcy. And she said, I think about this, and she said, I think, we did everything with integrity. We feel we're good people, and yet she said, I think about the name in the paper, and everybody sees bankrupt, and you see your name. And she said, that, I think, is the worst thing that could happen. And then she said to me one day, she said, but then I decided that if that happens, that happens. That's a one-day thing. Somebody sees it. Somebody makes a judgment about us. We still are people with integrity. And as it turned out, they didn't have to file bankruptcy. They landed on their feet, and they done really good. So she didn't have to worry about that worst thing. But that was the worst thing, and she contemplated how she would handle that. So now we're going to shift from the sweep of perception. We're going to now sweep the forgiveness. We want to be forgiving in our life. Holmes says, this is from 365, Science of Mind. He says, we must forgive everything and everyone. Whether we like it or not, whether we accept it or not, This is one of the great truths of life. Not only should we forgive others, but we should equally forgive ourselves. We must forgive everything and everyone. So think about that sweep of Ganesha's trunk, just sweeping anything that isn't forgiving out of the way, any resentments, any ideas of let's get even with this one or that one, just sweep them out of the way. They do no good. Sweep them out of the way again to open ourselves for clarity to hear that inner voice. Do you guys know this book called A Walk in the Woods? It was a movie also with Robert Redford. The book is by Bill Bryson. And Bill Bryson, if you haven't read any of his books, I love his books. They're very clever and entertaining. And this one was about a walk that he and a friend took on the Appalachian Trail. And apparently every year about 1,500 hikers start off, I don't know, to me if I were going to walk the Appalachian Trail, which I wouldn't, I would start out from Maine and go, where does it go, to Georgia? Because then I know I'd be going downhill, right? In my mind, I don't know why. But anyway, about 1,500 people start this journey. It's 2,160 miles, but about 10% of the people that start actually finish it. And one of the reasons is because people carry all this stuff in their backpacks. And the story is told, this one guy had so much stuff, he stopped at the first rest stop, and he thought, I can't go on, it's just too hard. And so a seasoned hiker came up to him and went through his stuff with him, and they managed to find about 26 pounds of stuff he could send home. 26 pounds. He had a cassette player with 6 cassettes of bird calls. He thought he could send that one home. You know, some knives, some fancy Swiss Army knife that weighed about 5 pounds. You know, we'll take one little knife instead. So anyway, there are ways that people could lighten their loads, and he was helped by this. And we can equate this, I think, to the loads we carry too. The loads of guilt, loads of unforgiveness, and et cetera, that we carry, our failures, our judgments, et cetera. And these things hold us back. They really poison us, and it's so important to let them go. So the second sweep of Ganesha's trunk is the sweep of forgiveness of self and others, and again, that opens the channel for our being able to hear that voice within us, get that guidance that is so important. And then the third sweep is the sweep, he calls it to be open. And that is to be open and to listen to that still small voice and follow it. Sometimes we hear it and we're not going there, but we need to listen and have the courage to follow that still voice. There's a New Thought writer, he lived about the same time as Ernest Holmes. His name was Ralph Waldo Trine. And he said, if we will but follow this voice of intuition, it will speak ever more clearly and more plainly until by and by it will be absolute and unerring in its guidance. Now, how clear is that? Isn't that a nice... that's kind of like listening to Emma Curtis Hopkins. Stuff these people that first studied and brought this idea of New Thought to us, a new way of thinking about our Christianity, a new way of thinking about the kind of teachings of Plato and Aristotle, the philosophies of the past, kind of brought it all together. And how clear that is. If we will but follow this voice of intuition, it will speak ever more clearly and more plainly until by and by it will be absolute and unerring in its guidance. So when we listen to it, we can trust it and follow it. So those are the three sweeps, the sweep of our our perspectives that aren't serving us, the sweep of being unforgiving, and that idea of being open to listening and following. We are open to our inner voice. So we create this space, this space to listen to this inner voice. Holmes says, "No one need go unguided through life, for all are divine at the center, and all images are all images of the Most High." So let's dwell on that, and I will take you into a spiritual mind treatment. So if you take a deep breath, get comfortable where you are. Know you don't need to be anywhere else right at this moment. And I'll speak this in first person as though it's for me, but as you know, it is also for you. And I know I am one with that one power in the universe. There is only one power, and that power has the perfect solution to any perceived dilemma in my life. That power meets any challenge perceived in my life. That power is a power of peace and love and joy and balance and goodness, and it's all good. And I'm united with it. It is one with me. It experiences life through its creation, through each and every one of us, giving me the power to speak my word. And even though in the past I might have chosen a perspective that didn't work for me, that wasn't good for me, that didn't serve me. I might have been unforgiving. I might have been resentful or something in the past. I might have been that. And I might not have been open. I might not have been listening and following that guidance. But even though that's the past, now I declare I am open. I declare my willingness to choose a perspective that is good for me, that meets my highest needs. I choose a healthy perspective. And I choose forgiveness, forgiving myself and everyone else in my life. And I'm open to that still small voice, listening to that still small voice that I can count on, that I can trust in. And I'm grateful. I'm grateful that this is the truth. This is the truth of life. This is how the law works. This is how life works. And I am grateful for that. And I release these words now to that beneficent conspiracy that does the work. And so it is.